Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy. So what do you got for us today, Claire?
Today, we're headed to the place with the largest population of white-tailed deer. It's also known as the live music capital of the world.
Texas?
Why would you guess Texas?
Because I just did a case that Austin is the live music capital of the world.
That must have stuck with me. I thought you were going to guess Tennessee or Virginia, but I'm just going to keep on going because I had other facts. It's the only state to have become a state through a treaty with the United States rather than by territorial annexation. And it's its own nation. It was its own nation from 1836 to 1845.
Nice. Go Texas.
It also has a state capitol building that's taller than the U.S. Capitol. So I guess the whole everything's bigger in Texas still fits. But you ruiner of things, we are indeed headed to Texas.
I'm a good guesser.
Mm-hmm.
Today, at least.
So we're going to head to Fort Worth with a newly divorced gal, Sharon Green, in 1987. Now, she would decide that she's going to start a new life and turn over a new leaf. So with all that, purging her husband and all that, she's also going to start drug addiction counseling as part of that process.
I guess it's never too late to start or stop.
Now, it's there that she mentions during her counseling sessions that she mentions that her ex-husband killed people.
Oh.
And I would imagine that it's not an everyday occurrence for a counselor to have somebody admit to knowing information about murders. So the counselor is going to be like, yeah, so you should probably tell the police about that, especially I'm going to assume he's not in jail, and if these are unsolved cases and you know things about it, you should provide that information. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to do that.
She's an idiot. Not because she's deciding to come forward, that it took telling someone else that's like, yeah, you should come forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sharon would take the advice of her drug counselor and...
I'm sorry.
And she would tell detectives that her former husband, Ricky Lee Green, had told her about killing 4 people, 3 in 1985 and 1 in 1986. And she kept quiet all these years because she was scared.
Mm-hmm. She kept quiet because she was a high.
Not to minimize, I guess if you know somebody who has killed people, it can be a scary thing of you might be next.
We run with different people.
Well, I don't know anybody who's done the murderings.
Yeah, exactly.
But 2 women, Sandra Bailey and Betty Jo Monroe, were 2 victims, and then 2 men, 16-year-old Jeffrey Davis and Stephen Fetterman, who happened to be the Channel 5 news executive. So his was a pretty notorious cold case because people knew who he was. Now, Ricky happened to be on the list of suspects for Stephen's murder, but they didn't have any evidence to arrest him for it. So when Sharon comes forward with, he said he did it, and he just happened to be on the list of suspects of people to talk to, they go and arrest Ricky on April 27th, 1989. Tarrant County is going to set his bond at $1.25 million. So he's going to be sitting there.
That's high for back in the 80s.
Well, killed 4 people, one of which happened to be a somebody. Not that makes it right. Spoiler, a particular level of brutality with all of the murders. So it's not like he shot somebody and moved on. They were brutal.
How brutal?
We'll get there. But we're going to rewind. So Ricky was born December in 1960 in Fort Worth, Texas. He was one of several children born to his mom and dad. I'm not going into that because it's not relevant. But he was one of many. Ricky's dad was abusive pretty much daily to all of his children. He would molest Ricky's sister and physically abuse the boys by punching them in the stomachs, applying electroshocks to their bodies, and on family fishing trips, he had a habit of holding them under the water until they nearly drowned before he lit them up.
This is your way of like combining all your cases.
Yes.
Because you've got the one dude that had the babies with his daughter, and then you've got the punching in the stomach, the little boy that was getting hit so much.
Yeah. I didn't have anybody that did electroshocks that I know of.
No, that would be one of my cases, though, where the guy would torture the people by zapping them.
Yeah.
The bizarre.
I don't think I have any partial drownings.
Nope, that's again my feller. He drowned people. You just combined all the cases, throw in some bestiality, and blood drinking, and you got them all.
But I imagine that would be traumatic to endure. But beyond that, the dad also had a habit of loading his BB gun with the old-timey ones where they were the metal pellets. And he would shove Ricky off the porch and tell him to run as he starts shooting him. And he was about 6 when his dad would do that.
Aw.
And naturally, he would get shot a lot because if somebody's got a BB gun and they shove you off the porch and tell you to run, you start off really close.
Serpentine.
Well, I would imagine he cried a lot because he got hit a lot with metal pellets, and his dad would only say, well, learn to run faster.
Poor baby.
Now, the abuse got so bad that Ricky actually ends up losing an eye due to a barbed wire incident. I don't know what the fuck the barbed wire incident is, or maybe when he was running from the BB gun, he fell into a fence, but he loses an eye.
That's awful.
Mm-hmm. So he'll eventually get that glass eye. That he would go stay with his grandfather every now and then, and there's no refuge from his dad because when he stays with his grandpa, he's subjected to being sodomized regularly.
Oh, this poor baby.
And since he's not getting in, what he should be at home, it can make it real hard to thrive in school when that's what you have in your home life. So school is pretty rough on Ricky as well because, I mean, he's enduring a lot at home. So he doesn't like school, and I imagine he's bullied because of his one eye. But he's going to drop out in 8th grade and starts working as a radiator repairman. Fast forward to adulthood, he would get hitched for a short while in February 1984, but just after 2 months, Ricky would be convinced that his new wife is having sex with other people because he's convincing himself that she's not satisfied in the sex department.
He's a 1-minute man is what it is.
So he would get drunk as a skunk and wait for her to come home from work one night. And I imagine him sitting on the couch in the dark just waiting for that door to open. He's armed with a knife when she comes in that door. He pops up, puts it to her throat, and proceeds to rape her.
Oh.
Once his drunk ass is passed out, she's going to gather all of her shit and leave and never look back.
Good for her.
I say she narrowly missed that. Now, a few weeks later, he's going to meet Sharon Dollar. Their relationship starts off as a frenzy of booze and sex for the first few days. And after just day 3 of them knowing each other and getting all sexed up, Sharon's like, hey, you want to move into my trailer? And he's like, I sure do. And even though Ricky's super happy with Sharon, his drinking and drug activities would continue to escalate. And as luck would have it for Ricky, Sharon was a bit of a sexual activity enthusiast and enjoyed hematolagnia.
What the?
And in case you're like me, and clearly you...
It sounds like some blood stuff.
I did the same thing. I was like, the fuck is that? It's just a fancy schmancy word meaning you have a blood fetish.
You did mix all the cases together.
I did run down the rabbit hole of there are people who like to... I don't want to say stab because that... To me, stabbing sounds like a really deep wound. But there are people who like to... inflict injuries on one another during the throes of sex or before as like a foreplay thing of making each other bleed or get real extra excited when they're smearing blood all over each other. And before you go the route of your basting case, it's not it's not a period thing. It's because that's a whole new other fetish, which I was like, I did not know any of this, but that's a fetish of its own. This one's more of the puncture variety.
Our number 1 fan is really going to enjoy this case. I'm just saying it now.
Yeah, but anyway, so he managed to find a gal who apparently has no stopping point of where she's willing to go.
She's a freak.
Now, one night, while they're just wrestling around, Sharon gets a hankering for blood, and before Ricky can really object or she says anything, she sticks his penis with a needle and starts sucking the blood from his Johnson.
How did he not smack her? I feel like if I
was just like, she would have been the first murder victim.
Yeah, I feel like if I were to poke Jason's penis with a needle and draw blood, He's going to just, his initial response
It's going
is,
to be a
was,
punch to the temple.
yeah,
So the way it sounded like it occurred to me is he's like sprawled out and she's about to suck his Johnson. Only she reaches for the needle, pokes, and then. So for him, I think he's probably drunk and on drugs, so his reflexes may not be all that quick.
she lucked
And
out.
yeah, because then it goes to, I guess he liked it.
Oh,
So he's just let it happen.
ugh.
And I'm just also going to assume there was a needle handy from their drug activities, which means that was a used needle. But I didn't read anything that said Sharon had a hobby of embroidery or needlepoint. So I'm going to
I,
say a used drug needle, which is also a level of ew.
that's the
But
other case. The guy that lost his penis. You really tried to rope all the cases in, all our cases in one. Good for you, Claire. Checking my gag reflex on this one, though.
but I'm just telling you that I didn't even know people were doing that.
I don't think people are. I think these freaks are the only ones.
It was disturbing. But he must have liked it a lot because he's going to make her his second missus in September.
Ugh.
But I'm going to rewind a little bit, just 6 months before they get
I'm
hitched.
going to ask Jason if I
If
poked
you
it
stabbed him in the penis, would you
and then
want me to
sucked
suck
his
the blood
blood,
out?
what would his reaction be? I think he's going to get very darty eyed.
Yeah.
You should ask Dave, see what he says.
I know what he would say. And I feel like he would not let me see it ever again.
Just for asking.
Yeah. Anyway, so I had to tell you that one because I want you to know the level of relationship Sharon and Ricky have.
Disgusting,
That,
disturbing. Got it.
that leads to their marriage. But 6 months before they get married, March 27th, 1985, Ricky would kill what is believed to be his first victim, 16-year-old Jeffrey Lynn Davis. Now, Jeffrey lived with his mom in a mobile home at Lake Worth Mobile Park. He would tell her that he's going to go out for a bit of fishing, which is just about 100 yards from his house. So he's not going far, but he's not going to come home, and they're going to find his fishing gear still on the porch. So his mom's going to report him missing, but Jeffrey had run away before and returned home after 2 weeks.
Oh.
So I feel like where she was worried, she figured he done did it again and would be home anytime.
Oh, I'm so grateful for my children sometimes.
I like how you threw in the sometimes.
Well, there's times children can be agitating.
Now, it isn't until his body is found a few days later in a shallow, swampy area near Fort Worth Nature Center, stabbed to death, that his mom had all her hopes of her son returning home evaporate. Not only was his death from stabbing, he had been castrated and nearly beheaded.
Oh.
Now, it's going to be 4 years until they arrest Ricky, and that I can't even imagine 4 years waiting to find out what happened to your boy. But what's even sadder than that is Ricky's mom's going to die of a heart attack before that day is ever there.
Oh, that's awful.
And I feel like it's more of a broken heart and just grief of he didn't just get murdered, he was mutilated and murdered.
Poor baby.
Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, Ricky did that when Ricky and Sharon were still dating, but they're gonna get hitched in September. And now Sharon, when she comes into the marriage, she brings a child from a previous relationship.
Great.
Now, the dad lived in Connecticut, and Sharon was out of town when Ricky kills Jeffrey because she was bringing her daughter back from visiting with her dad. So they get married in September. By October 12th, 1985, Ricky would pick up a hitchhiker and also a topless dancer,
No.
28-year-old Betty Jo Monroe, off the highway and takes her to his and Sharon's trailer. There, he would sexually assault her, stab her over 17 times, mutilate one of her breasts, and then strike her with a hammer.
You like the breast mutilation cases?
I don't.
You do?
He would then dump her into a rural area of Flatwood, and she would be found the next day, which couldn't have been that rural.
It's really sad.
She was so mutilated that they couldn't figure out who they had found at first. So for a while, they call her Mama Doe for the next 3.5 years because she had a C-section scar. And in those 3.5 years, no one reported her missing, which is super sad.
What about her kid?
I knew you were going to ask that, so I did put a side note here. Now, mind you, it does go into a cold case and for those years until they find Ricky. Now, once she's identified, it's found out that her 2 children live with her mother, and she had given birth a few weeks before her death to a little girl who had also died.
Oh,
Now, she was currently living with a biker and had lived a fairly hard life up until her death. But I figured you'd want to know if she's got a C-section scar, where are the children? Did he snatch those up, or somebody left or abandoned, or he's done something to a child? So that's your side note.
all right.
Now, a little over a month after that, or November 23rd, Ricky would meet 27-year-old Sandra Bailey at the 50/50 Club in Fort Worth. Sandra was there celebrating her cousin's 19th birthday, but would end up going home with Ricky, back to his murdery trailer.
Where's his wife?
I'll tell you.
All right.
Once at his home, though, he would sexually assault Sandra and stab her over 30 times before bludgeoning her with a hammer. Her naked body would be dumped in a drainage culvert near Henrietta, and she wouldn't be found for 4 days. Then, on December 29th, 1986, when a landlord goes to check on a tenant after he misses his work, he would immediately call 911 when he sees feet poking out from under a pile of blankets and clothing. And not only that, the house looked like it was hit by a tornado with all the things that were flung around. So he's going to skedaddle on out of there and call 911 because he's seen too much as it is. Now, the police would get there and identify the body of Stephen Fetterman. He'd been tied to the posts of his bed with neckties, castrated, and stabbed several times with kitchen knives.
What's with him and castrating people?
I don't know. His home was ransacked and any money was gone, so was his vehicle. Now, Stephen was a very well-liked man, sociable, doing great in his career. Co-workers loved him. He was respected by anyone who knew him. So, with his bright future ahead of him and a 0 on the enemies list, police are stumped, and the case is going to go unsolved for the next few years. It also had a whole lot of publicity because he worked for the TV place. Now, his friends and family believe it'll never be solved because I imagine once you go into a few years, you don't expect anything to pop up.
Yeah, because you're not getting new evidence.
Yeah. Now, Sharon would tell police that she picked Ricky up in her car around that time, and he had said he had done something real bad. He also had a pillowcase with him that I assume had all the ransacked crap in there, and blood on one of the legs of his jogging suit. And she would wait until the next day to ask him what the bad thing was that he'd done. And Ricky would tell her that he went into the kitchen to get knives while Stephen was in the shower. He then hid the knives under the bed, so when Stephen got out, Ricky told him that they should take turns tying each other up, and Stephen should go first.
She doesn't find any of this weird?
She stabbed his penis, Andrea.
Yeah, but did they have an open marriage? Because I can tell you, I would have a problem with Jason bringing men or women into our bed.
Well, he goes to Stephen's house.
Whatever.
So you're getting ahead of the story. So I'm glad you also did the whole, how do you hear any of this and not have a problem? So keep in mind, this is just a version Sharon is telling the officers of what he has told her.
She's involved.
Then he says he grabs a knife from under the bed once Stephen's all tied up and starts stabbing Stephen, all the while telling him how much he hates homosexuals, and stabbing and stabbing.
Oh, he's upset that he's secretly gay.
Ricky would go for another knife and stick it in his throat, leaving Stephen gasping. So he'd grab another knife and proceeds to cut Stephen from sternum to scrotum. Stephen is still alive and gasping for air.
Poor Stephen.
Ricky takes the knife and chops off his penis and shoves it in Stephen's mouth to quiet him,
I don't feel like that would quiet him.
leaving him to die.
You've made me want to cover my junk that I don't have.
Well, that's how he left him to die. The brutality of the murders is why his bond is going to be set so high. Now, after he leaves him like that, he steals money that he finds and then flees. Now, he would tell her that story before Stephen's body is even found, and that would be kind of the beginning of the end for their relationship. Now, all these cases would go unsolved over the next 2 years. That's when Sharon gets a divorce from Ricky and goes to her drug counseling, and that brings us to when I told you she was telling detectives this whole spiel. Now, So they arrest Ricky, and no sooner that they have Ricky in custody does he confess to murdering Sandra Bailey and Betty Jo. Now, he admits he brought them back to his and Sharon's home and killed them in the bathtubs. Now, with Jeffrey Davis, the young boy, Ricky claims that he saw the boy, invited him into his car to go driving around and drinking beer, and the boy gets in, and that's what they do. They spend the better part of the day just driving around drinking beer. Then Ricky pulls over because he has to pee real extra bad.
Yeah, whatever. He pulled over because he wanted to make the little boy suck his penis.
Well, he claims he goes to get back in the car, and Jeffrey's over there in the passenger seat masturbating and asks Ricky if he wants to touch him. Ricky gets super mad because he don't like homosexuals and starts beating the shit out of him.
Mm-hmm.
Then he goes back to driving, only this time he heads for a secluded area where he drags him out of the car, continues beating him, then mutilates him with a knife before continuing to stab him to death and dump his body. Now, with Stephen Fetterman, Ricky said he was hoping to get paid for some sex with him after they met at Casino Beach, and that's why they went back to his house. And then he ended up stabbing him to death because I guess at some point he realized he don't like gays.
Yeah, after he nuts, and he's like...
Regrets.
Yeah.
Then he ends up stabbing him to death and cutting him from stomach to sternum and doing the castrating, leaving a knife in his throat, one in his abdomen, and he wiped the prints off the knives and then stole money in his car, which made the crime a capital offense. Then he ditched the car a little ways away and did all that because he hated homosexuals. Now, after Ricky's confession, I guess he was like enjoying that detectives are listening to his story. You've seen plenty of interrogations to know when somebody's just like, they're telling their story and they're real extra excited about it. Because they get to relive it while they're telling it. Now, after Ricky's confession, he starts to think, probably the first time in his life, and inquires how they even found him. Ricky was pretty confident that his dad probably turned him in. I don't know why he thought his dad turned him in.
Was his dad aware of what he was doing?
I don't know. That's why he was doing the whole, why would he assume his dad turned him in?
Sounds like his dad knew.
And it's at that point the detectives are like, sure wasn't. Sharon was the one who came forward and led to your arrest.
Those detectives are assholes.
And boy, is Ricky beyond shocked. He's like, what? Sharon? Sharon participated during 2 of the murders. She even helped clean the bathroom up and even helped dump the bodies. And he's like, that whole story I told you, I didn't tell you any of the stuff she did because I thought I was protecting her role. Which was real interesting to detectives because up until this point, Sharon made it seem like she'd only heard the stories of the murderings, not that she was right there.
Participating?
And they had made it a point to ask her 3 separate times if she had been involved at all. So they're going to go back to Sharon and let her know, yeah, so Ricky said you participated in the murders. And Sharon's going to be all, nuh-uh, I done feared he was going to kill me. That's why I just sat by quietly.
Right.
Yeah. So then she's going to be like, so there was this one time I was sleeping in bed when Ricky would get home with a woman, later would be identified as Sandra Bailey, and make me watch as he raped the woman and then stab her to death during the throes of that activity, which was real extra scary, and that's why she didn't come forward, because she was scared of Ricky, and she knew if Ricky was going to hurt her, he'd probably get the dad involved because she had sex with Ricky's dad, and then her and Ricky stole $10,000 in drug money from him. So I don't know if she was having sex with Ricky's dad while he was robbing him blind, but between Ricky and Ricky's dad, she was fearing for what would happen to her. And on top of all of that, there was also this one time that Ricky was choking her and she blacked out. And when she came to, he said he was going to kill her, but he just couldn't bring himself to it. And I feel like that left detectives doing some blinking.
It left me blinking. Where is her daughter during all of this?
Dude, I think other than a wildly bad mother, I feel like her kid was just alone in its room or during in-betweens was visiting with the dad, or I hope was gone for a lot of it. But she doesn't seem like she was too extra worried about where her kid was.
Hey.
But then she would continue and then then the other girl, Betty Jo Monroe, Ricky had plucked off the highway. He had offered her to come back to the house to take a shower and get cleaned up. When they were at the house, Ricky would join her in the shower. They would have sex before saying he needed to go get his wife from work. So he would take her in the car to go pick up his wife. And when Sharon gets in the car, Betty Jo's in the back seat with her 3-year-old. And she's just doing some more blinking. And Ricky whispers to her not to worry because he's going to kill her anyway.
Yeah.
Then they get home to their trailer, and Sharon would go to put her daughter to bed. And Ricky's version is Sharon stripped down naked after Ricky suggests they all have sex. And Betty Jo's like, and hard pass, I'm going to get on the road. And before she can actually leave, Ricky and Sharon overpower her, tie her up on the bed, and now she's thrashing and screaming for them to let her go. So in order to keep her from waking up her child, they drag her into the bathroom. Ricky will sexually assault her using a hammer, while Sharon runs to the kitchen for a knife because all that screaming, she's got to stop. Now Sharon comes running back in and stabs her before Ricky can even react. And Ricky's wielding the hammer. He starts bashing her in the head 3 to 4 times, breaking her skull in 2 separate spots.
Oh my gosh.
Now Sharon wanted to try the hammer, so she took it from Ricky and gave her a whack with it. And with Sharon and her blood fetish, and both of them covered in blood, they're going to proceed to have some wild sex right there.
Ew.
Next to poor Betty Jo.
I hope she goes to jail too.
Afterwards, they would take her body into the car and clean the bathroom. Then they would drive out and dispose of her body in a secluded area. And I'm just going to assume they left the daughter at home sleeping. But it's like, the fuck is with these two?
You like the dynamic duos of like your Fred West and...
I don't like them. I just find it disturbing these people can find each other. Now, Sharon's version is a bit different. She would say Ricky took Betty Jo to the bathroom where she would hear what sounded like hammering noises. Then she would hear something that sounded like stabbing noises at least 17 times. Then she would poke her...
Wait, what does stabbing noises sound like?
Fucking don't know. I was doing the whole... What? Then she says she pokes her head in the bathroom to see what all's going on. And she sees that Ricky has Betty Jo in the tub and it's full of blood. And Ricky'd be all, you hate me, don't you?
Yes.
She doesn't say what her response is to that, but she's going to help him get rid of the body.
Well, that tells you the response right there.
Ricky's version with Sandra Bailey is about the same with Betty Jo. Ricky's going to say that he brings her home. Sharon would be in bed, and when Sandra sees Sharon, she's like, I'm not down for this. But the two gang up and behave similarly to how they killed Betty Jo. Only this time, the sex wasn't mind-blowing as the first time. So they're going to dispose of her body. Super disappointed.
They're disgusting.
So detectives at this point are like, these are two wildly different versions of whose role was what. So they give Sharon a polygraph about her involvement since they now have such different accounts. Now she's going to fail that polygraph when she tries to claim that she did not participate and only helped dispose of bodies. Then once they're like, yeah, so you failed this miserably, she's going to be like, yeah, okay, so maybe I might have used the hammer on one of them.
Ugh.
When they're like, that's not all you did. Then she's like, okay, I perhaps did some stabbing, but it was only after they were already dead, so I can't be charged with a crime, right?
She's disgusting. Like, he's already disturbing and disgusting, but she's a special level.
Now, Sharon would be arrested and indicted on capital murder charges. Her parents would stand by her side, saying that her arrest was based on a story of a known liar, and they wouldn't have any information if she hadn't come forward. And the police are responsible for any future individual not coming forward on cold cases in the future because they're charging her.
She participated.
Now, Sharon's attorney would say, Sharon's a battered woman, and battered women will do things that they normally don't do, up to and including killing someone out of fear.
Okay, so the battered woman thing, sure. However, their relationship started with her sticking a needle in his penis, so I'm going to say he was a battered man first.
Now, at trial, the prosecution would argue that there was zero evidence to indicate she was a battered woman, but make no mistake, there were battered women in this case. The women were the victims.
Yeah.
Sharon would be found guilty of murder, and she would be sentenced to 10 years.
What?
Of probation.
Oh my gosh.
In exchange for her testimony against her husband.
That's disturbing.
Now, it threw a lot of people, and some jurors explained, based on the medical examiner's opinion, the jurors did feel that Betty Jo was most likely alive when Sharon stabbed and hammered her body, but Sharon believed she was already dead, and ultimately the jury didn't feel she was a willing participant, but it seemed to be a mindset of, what would you do if someone just murdered someone? and hands you the knife and tells you to do the same. Would you stab what you would think is a body?
No. I'd stab the feller that handed me the knife.
So I think that's funny because Oprah is going to interview her after this is all said and done. And when that question is posed to Oprah, and she's like, I guess I'm just different because I wouldn't stab somebody dead or alive.
That's a fairly normal response.
Well, that, and paired with that, she thought that somebody was already dead, so she figured in order to not anger Ricky is why she stabbed and hammered what she thought were dead bodies, even though the medical examiners say that all those wounds were while they were still alive. So just because the lady was unconscious doesn't mean you didn't potentially give the final blow. But that paired with, if Sharon hadn't come forward, none of this would have been closed. Ricky would have never gotten caught. They would have still 0 leads, is why she got the sentence she did, because they needed her to cooperate to get Ricky. Now, during Ricky's trial, some jurors had to leave the room when they would show the crime scene pictures. One woman vomited. Still, the defense would try to go on with the he was abused in his childhood kind of defense. But the prosecution would call an expert witness to testify that just because you're abused in childhood doesn't mean you sexually mutilate people and stab them to death. But they would continue to give sob stories of how he had a horrific childhood and how relatives abused him and molested him, and how at 15 he started prostituting himself to men in order to fund his drug habits.
Huh.
And then Sharon would be all, Ricky was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He was a totally different person when he was on drugs and alcohol, and when he turned to Mr. Hyde, he was real scary.
Right.
Now, Ricky would be found guilty as well, and he'd be sentenced to the death penalty for how he killed Stephen Fetterman, and life sentences on the others.
Well, he will get plenty of dicks where he's going.
I do feel like he was a closet homosexual and was angry about it.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was one of those, he didn't feel like he could be openly gay, I guess. But I was glad when they did the whole, his sentence was the death penalty, because it was overkill extreme. Now, authorities also believed he was responsible for 8 to 12 other sexual-related slayings in North Texas during the mid-'80s, and I would believe that he is also, because the chunk of 2 years of Sharon not knowing what he was doing, dude, he was killing somebody per month.
Yeah.
So I don't believe at all when she left he stopped. If anything, I would think that he did more.
Right.
And if the fact that he sexually mutilated everybody, if they have ones in the area unsolved, he most likely did those.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially if he's chopping off dicks and shoving them in people's mouths.
Yeah, that's okay. Yep.
But he does get those sentences. However, Ricky would file appeals based on ineffective counsel. His reasoning was during his trial, his attorneys would argue of how to proceed. One attorney would hire a doctor in order to go with the he's insane defense, but then ends up leaving the team, I would assume because they were arguing about how to proceed, and was replaced by another attorney. Then those two would also butt heads to the point that they wouldn't even speak directly to each other. So they would go to the judge because one of the attorneys is like, I'd like to be dismissed from this. And the judge is like, no, get on with it. Figure out how to work together. Motion denied. It's not brought up again, so I don't know that.
So the two attorneys didn't get along, or the attorney didn't get along with the...
the defense. No, they were squabbling amongst each other.
Sounds like they wanted to approach the case 2 different ways. Somebody tried to pull rank, and the other one was like, fine, you don't need me then.
So they opted not to go with the doctor that the one had hired and Ricky had talked to. And I would imagine this was what they couldn't agree on. Because Ricky apparently told that doctor he had killed 15 other people and how what he was doing was helpful because he was cleansing the world of homosexuals and drug addicts. And his attorneys are like, yeah, we can't put somebody on the stand that's going to say that because we're supposed to be defending him. And that's quite the opposite of providing a defense. So they can't knowingly put that doctor on the stand to testify what he thought of Ricky.
Yeah.
But I feel like, how do you not put somebody on the stand? I mean, I get that they'd be in a shitstorm kind of a way if they did that. But then how do you not tell about somebody saying they killed 15 other people? But the one attorney, his stance was that they didn't want to do that, not because of the victim side, but because then it made it harder to believe that that Ricky wasn't a threat to society anymore if they knew he had killed other people. And I was doing the whole, are we literally trying to say we want him out and about ever again? I couldn't be a defense attorney for somebody like that.
No. I wouldn't be a good defense attorney because if I knew you were guilty...
Yeah. It's doing the whole, they're trying to paint the picture of he's not a future danger to society, and he is a danger to society. So how do you paint the picture he's not when he is?
Lies is how.
And then on his other appeal, Ricky's stance was that he was never present, or not only on the grounds of that the doctor's findings were never presented in court, so the fact that they held evidence, he was gypped that fair trial. But not only that, he wasn't present during that meeting with the judge with the one attorney wanting to be removed. So by that, he was denied his constitutional right to be present during all phases of his trial. But the judge was like, yeah, that had nothing to do with you and your case. It was these two not being able to get along, so your presence there wouldn't have changed anything, so no, on both accounts. But it scared me a little at the prospect of he could have gotten off.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
But October 8th, 1997, this sumbitch would be put to death by lethal injection after 8 years of prison. His last meal was 5 scrambled eggs, 4 sausage patties, 8 slices of toast, 6 slices of bacon, all washed down with 4 pints of milk.
Couldn't get enough sausage in prison.
That's all I got on that.
Dude, that guy...
It was a whole lot to take in, huh?
Not for him, but he had guilt after he took it in.
Yeah. I forget what I was going to say when I was in the midst of one of those because I had my thoughts and then it flew out.
Don't you hate that?
I do. Because I was thinking, I'll remember this towards the end.
And you'll remember it as soon as we stop recording.
So I think when you were talking about when you were doing the whole, where was Sharon during all of this? So I think when she initially came forward and was telling the detectives, I think she was trying to paint it like she was at work or she was gone, of like she wasn't there and he was just telling her about stuff. But in reality, she was very participating. Much there. Which is why when you did the whole, where was she during all this? I feel like his version was also believable because, I mean, especially when he finds out that she's the one who turned him in, and then the fact that she fails the lie detector, all of the things, which also to me makes sense why she wouldn't go forward to police, because she doesn't want to admit she helped.
Yeah, she's just as big a piece of shit as he is.
At first, when I was reading the case, I got confused. Not to say that I wasn't open, not really open, but I didn't realize at first he was the one who had sex with Stephen Fetterman. I thought it was like he came in to her having sex with him. And then I was like, she wasn't there for that one. And then I was like, oh.
Yeah, when I connected those dots, that's why I was like, yeah. So he's closeted and very angry and hostile about it.
Yeah.
I sure hope he worked through all that while he was in prison.
I'm surprised. I feel like, and I feel bad saying this one, but I feel like he didn't get a good shake of a trial because I feel like it could very much have been pitched that because he was raped during his childhood, he ended up hostile about gay sex. He happened to end up growing up to be gay, even if he didn't want to admit it. And then because of all of that surrounded by when he would try to have those sexual activities, he would just turn into a rage because I'm sure those acts would bring up whatever he endured in his childhood to some level and he'd go full tilt crazy.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Not saying it's okay, but I do feel like it's connected to the childhood he had, and those people are disgusting.
I agree.
And the fact that you had a 15-year-old who was dropped out of school and prostituting himself and doing drugs, like, I don't know, his dad's a piece of shit. His grandfather was a piece of shit. They raised a piece of shit.
He married a piece of shit. I mean, she's no saint.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd be willing to bet that she started it.
Well, they ultimately did the whole probation thing, which evidently that's not unheard of to do, especially for exchange of your testimony to make sure somebody else gets convicted. But
so I think it has more to do with the fact that she didn't initiate the murderings. She just participated after the fact.
Yeah, she didn't find the victims.
Right. Well, and even if he brought people back, she wasn't the one actually murdering the people.
Yeah.
So I think they looked at it as if you remove him out of the scenario, who's a greater risk?
You hit the nail on the head because that was ultimately the jury didn't find that Sharon was going to be a danger to society.
Yeah.
That as much as apparently during her trial they threw out all of her weird sex stuff, that other than they were like, well, there are plenty of people who are promiscuous and dabble in whatever weird shit that don't kill people. And really, it was the equation of the two of them together were a problem.
It's really disgusting.
It was really...
Sorry, I'm not laughing at what he did. It was just the idea of, can you imagine when she whipped out the needle and stabbed him first?
I feel like you can imagine the look on my face when I read it, because I was like, she did what? I can tell you if I reached for anything pointy, I feel like if I go to reach for anything and Dave's penis is out, he's going to be real squirmy. But
that's because he hears our cases.
In no way can I say I would be fast enough to stab, enough to draw blood. It wasn't like she poked it and it was like a little bit of a tickle. But she drew blood and then sucked the injury. And again, I'm going to go back to, it was a dirty ass druggie needle.
That's disgusting.
They probably used it several times.
Ugh.
He's lucky his penis didn't fall off.
It's really gross.
Although a penis infection would have been nice.
You don't know.
He lost an inch.
Ew. Or he gained it from the scab.
It's now got a divot.
Ugh.
No, but I didn't know that was a thing people like to do. I mean, I feel like I have heard of people liking the sight of blood, but I assumed that was more of like the serial killer people. I didn't realize...
Those people aren't normal. They just haven't reached their full psychotic potential.
I didn't realize that I could just be strolling around at any point during the day and maybe perhaps walk by somebody who enjoys painting themselves with blood of their person.
Not to compare it.
You do it?
Ew. No. But, like, I wonder if cutters, people that are cutters.
I think that's a different level. That's more of taking your emotional pain and making a physical one.
Yes, but if you enjoy the sight of your blood enough...
I don't think it's an enjoyment there. That's a different sort of... I wouldn't pair those two. I picture the, running a blade across their arm and doing a... of a different level.
The willingness to see your own blood.
Or somebody else's. I think it's the pokiness of the other two.
She got off on seeing him squirm.
Well, she wanted the taste of blood with his penis, so she got a twofer.
She could have been just a lesbian and then gone after her women folk when it was their monthlies.
Well, I already told you that's a different fetish, because I did the same thing. I was like, ew, this is like a basting with tampons kind of scenario, and then when I looked that up, I forget what the name of that one was.
Your search history is so screwed.
I did a blanking. I was like, there's another name for it? There's enough of it going on that they've named it?
Ugh.
I'd like to know what the name of that as a phobia is, because I've got that.
Same. And I think Dave's going to have the one of a...
I feel like that's a hard pass for me. So just letting you know, Dave, if you want me to stab your penis with a needle and suck the blood out, hard pass.
He's never loved you more.
I feel like he's listening to this, making darty-eyed facial expressions.
I'm listening to this making darty-eyed facial expressions. And again, I don't have the junk that they're stabbing.
And I would say, what is wrong with the world we're living in? But this was in the 80s. So I guess that was the lukewarm 60s and 70s. The shit that in the 80s was more quieted, I guess.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I'll be thinking about that one today, mainly, because when I see Jason next, I'm going to ask him, hey,
can I stab your penis and suck the blood out?
I'm not going to ask, can I? I'm going to ask, what would he do?
So I feel like consent is part of the thing.
I don't want to actually do it.
Well, I can just say that when I had to look up what that word was, because they said she had whatever that fetish word was, and I was like, okay, I know the hema part. Clearly it's some sort of a blood thing that caused a lot of blinking.
Yeah.
And
I caused a lot of blinking here too.
I think it's a shame that he decided to be quiet after admitting to those 4 because I think there could have been a lot of closure to the other victims. But again, because they were so stabby, he was so stabby with them, and then the sexual mutilation is why, like, the other cases, they think he was most likely the person who did it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame they don't have the finality of being able to close those and knowing he did do that.
Yeah.
And I know we've done cases before where they try to throw all the other cases that are open and of similar styles.
I don't feel like this is on the same level.
Same. So I felt the same way of, like, considering he did 2, like, within 30 days of each other, I absolutely believe he had time to do or kill that many other people within the area in the next 2 years.
Well, and I don't feel like there were a whole lot of people being sexually mutilated.
I would hope there weren't several other people sexually mutilating people.
So, yeah.
But it's also the hazard to, if you're going to hitchhike, it makes it real hard for people to have leads if they don't know where you are on a day-to-day.
Let's face it, getting into strangers' cars is just bad. Mm-hmm. They tell you not to do it, but then you've got Uber now. But we've done cases now where the Uber drivers turn out to be not so great, or you got people that pretend to be the Uber drivers.
Yeah, but even with the Uber driver portion, you got the trackability of that. Hitchhiking's a bad idea.
It's just harder to get away with it now than it was back before technology.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.